We're going to get going and kick things off tonight. So thank you all for joining. Thank you all for being a part of the conversation and for joining us tonight. We are going to be chatting about the U11s and 12s and also what CMSA is doing across all their leagues and as an organization right now, and really what we're trying to accomplish. So I know that there's going to be questions. If there are, please put them into the chat at any point. Please keep in mind, I am a one-person show tonight, so I'll be managing the door and letting people in as well as going through the presentation. So if there are some moments of stutter and stammer, it's not only because I've got a 3-week-old in my house right now and sleep is at a premium, but it's also because I'm trying to do a few different things tonight with this presentation. So please be patient. And if I don't get to your question right away, it's just because it's not on my screen, but I will be taking consistent breaks to go and answer any sort of questions that are put in the chat. Feel free as well to use the reactions button on Teams here. You can give the thumbs up, you can give the clap, the heart, the laugh, the shock, and raise your hand. Unfortunately, we won't be taking anyone off of mute or allowing the camera tonight because it just bogs down the bandwidth. And if things get too slow, I'm going to have to ask my wife to stop streaming whatever she's streaming on Netflix here tonight. So without any further ado, it looks like everyone is kind of joined and it's slowed down. Great turnout tonight, and thanks for joining us. We're going to kick it off tonight with a land acknowledgement, as we do all of our Club Connects and all of our meetings that we have with CMSA, as a way for us to express our duty within reconciliation and to acknowledge those who have caretaked and established the land before us. So.
What is land acknowledgement?
Those of us that are continuing our oral history are blessed. What we shared, that was told from way back. Many, many years ago, my great uncle asked my grandfather, "How long have we been here?" He relayed a story about carrying a way of life as needed the Blackfoot speaking people. The prairie region was dominated by the prairie grizzly bear. The prairie grizzly bear said, "You have to make treaty with everything in this prairie land. The animals, the birds, the fish, the water, the hills, the rocks. They all live in beings." He said, "I will move to the southern region." And so they became Sokichita, the people of the plains, open country.
We were part of the ecosystem. We were not masters of it. The buffalo and the moose and the elk and the antelope and the deer and the grass and the trees were more than us.
We were raised to believe that everything has a spirit and that everything around us is alive and has a purpose.
We praise Creator, giver of life. We give thanks to Mother Earth.
You know, after we grow up from our biological mothers, the earth becomes our caregiver. Everything that we need is there.
And we're supposed to honor the Creator with all our life. And we're supposed to look after the gift of the land that He gave us to live on.
For us, the land tells us the story. I mean, it's just story after story. Oh, this happened here, this happened here, this happened over here.
Just the story is not be the old man standing with his bow and his elbows on this side.
That was how our warriors pictured the landscape.
All the tributaries run into the bow. It's the mother of all water that flows through. People came there, they asked, what's the name of this river? They said, we cut our bow from the choke cherry trees. They're strong and powerful. We named this river the bow. Namachta.
I was born and raised in a road allowance, a strip of land that the farmers didn't want and the government didn't have no use for. Métis were just out on their own. We didn't belong anywhere. In Treaty 7 territory, I'm accepted, I'm something, and I'm with my people.
Because you're in the territory of your ancestors. No, this is home. Something that we pass on to our children and to our grandchildren.
This land has to be acknowledged. The people that took care of this land for a long time have to be acknowledged. At least find the truth about us.
I'm a residential school survivor. But it's up to me to have courage and go back and learn the ways of my people. The elders will say, I pray that the young people will not forget the Creator, the true acknowledgement of the land every day.
We honor our ancestors by acknowledging Treaty 7 territory. We acknowledge the Treaty 7 nations, the Piikani First Nation, the Siksika First Nation, the Kainai First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. We acknowledge the ancestral territory of the Siksikaitsitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, and the home of Métis Region number 3.
Excellent. So obviously a much better land acknowledgement than I will ever do, and will never do that justice as the people that have come before us can. A quick introduction to who I am and what we're going to be talking about tonight. For those who don't know me, my name is Jordan Stewart, and I am the CMSA technical leader. So part of my portfolio at CMSA is around coach education, is around league reform and alignment, is around supporting clubs, is around mentoring coaches, and is really about developing the game and growing the game, not only for the players, but for coaches, for referees, and parents. So I am typically difficult to get a hold of based on all of those work portfolios, but if you reach out, I try to get back within a little while. A little bit about me. I've coached players from about U8, even younger, U6, U4 kind of thing, all the way through to university age players, and I've seen the wide range of players and their developmental journeys and what it's going to take to produce not only very good players, but then also keep players involved in the game. My former employer was Alberta Soccer, and I was their regional coach for Southern Alberta, as well as the Alberta Recs director. So with that, my portfolio was player development, as well as supporting districts in Southern Alberta with their development of the game, and then also supporting the coach education streams through Alberta Soccer. I've got experience working in the grassroots clubs in Edmonton, where I'm from, as well as professional academies, Alberta Soccer, youth national team development streams, colleges and universities, some district outreach, and now within a district governing body with CMSA. So I've seen the system top to bottom, inside and out, and have a pretty good awareness of what's going on and what can be done and what it was going to take some time to be done. I want to make sure that I pass along some important info before we get into some other pieces that U11s and older, they all need photo IDs. So please make your way down to CMSA, to the office to get your photo ID. I know that there's a way that you can upload a photo into your profile and then we'll print it off and it'll be ready for pickup. We did have some dates at both the Genesis Center and at Calgary West, but I believe those have passed. So your option now is to come swing by our office and pick one up. If you've got a smartphone available and want to take a crack at naming our new mascot, please scan that QR code in the middle of your screen and submit a name. You'll be put into a draw to win one of 8 World Cup training balls, as well as maybe your name is selected for our new mascot. And lastly, just to mention about the tournaments that are upcoming that CMSA is going to be hosting, both the Winter Classic over New Year's and then the Family Day Long Weekend Tournament. And both of those are for U10 to U19. So I've already seen a question in the chat on the IDs. Refs are saying they do not have to ask for that at U11. If that's the case, that is news to me, and we'll make sure that we follow up with our referees. I believe that all of the U11 plus are meant to be having a photo ID at their game and an ID card. Sorry, just let me return. Perfect. Oh, apologies. Still fiddling with this. I want to make sure that we frame the conversation tonight in a way that we're on the same page and that we can understand where CMSA is coming from and what we're trying to do in terms of a principle and framework standpoint within the leagues. And that's to make our leagues as accessible as possible, inclusive of everyone, safe and welcoming, and most of all, enjoyable, not just for players, not just for coaches and referees, but also parents as well. We want to make sure that our leagues are run efficiently and well, and that it's an enjoyable experience for everyone involved. So with that being said, I was originally brought on to develop a technical plan for the organization. And you can read this document, which is the public-facing document, on our website. If you go to our website and you find guiding documents, this will be living there. And this is really valid until the end of next year and what we're trying to do to move the game forward from a technical standpoint within Calgary. You'll see 3 spheres within that. First one is govern, and a quick little overview of what's ongoing and what's been completed within this plan. And then also what's been delayed for numerous reasons. And I won't get into all of them now, but some bits just haven't gotten done and haven't gotten started yet. And we're comfortable to admit that and own that because we want to make sure that we're trying to do things well and not trying to do a lot of things mediocre. This second sphere in terms of develop really is about developing clubs, parents, players, referees, and coaches. So an entire sphere around just developing the game. And then lastly is around growing the game. We know that the game continues to grow and will continue to grow with the excitement from both our women's national team winning a gold medal at the Olympics, as well as our men's team qualifying for their first World Cup in over 30 years. With us hosting the next World Cup alongside USA and Mexico, we know that this is an unprecedented time for the game in Canada, and we really want to capitalize on growing the game and supporting its growth so it's got a great long-term future. And I'd be remiss if I didn't speak about what the actual player pathways look like within the country, and then specifically within Calgary and within Alberta. And Canada Soccer's produced this graphic where you'll see a lot of arrows going both up and then sideways to indicate really how players flow through this diagram. So typically you would start in these grassroots ages, stage 1, 2, or 3 of long-term player development, which would be active start, fundamentals, and learn to train, and then flow up into either soccer for life within a community standpoint, within a competitive standpoint, or within the train to train avenues. To give an acknowledgement of what this actually looks like locally within Calgary, you've got CMSA operating at 5 of those levels. So all the way from active start through to soccer for life and into that community and competitive soccer for life stream. We no longer have any role within the AYSL from an administrative standpoint, and really the AYSL is that train-to-train development league for players. Now, you can obviously go from a Soccer for Life box all the way over into these boxes and skip some of these steps, but typically this is how we would see players move between the stages and between the ages as well of this system. You'll see things like CUSA and Calgary Women's up here in the senior levels, as well as U Sports, the college leagues, NCAA, USL2, and UWS, which is all available here in Calgary, available to players of that ability and at the train to compete level at a senior age. And other players will flow through the high performance streams into Rex programs and Whitecaps programs, through to youth national teams and residency programs, all the way through into professional environments potentially. And this is really just a snapshot of the robustness really of Calgary soccer and what all is included within the game here. Within all of our leagues, we've got certain coaching standards. And if anyone's on the call right now and is curious about coaching, please reach out. My contact info will be at the end. But we're always looking to help coaches both progress and then also to attract coaches into the game. Typically, all of our leagues revolve around these 4 community stream workshops or Canada Soccer grassroots soccer coaching courses, which are 2 parts, 1 part theory, 1 part practical. And while this looks like you would have to take these courses to flow up into a C license, that's not the case. These are standalone courses for an age and stage of player that these coaches will be working with. Then you can enter in at no experience at all into a C license and look to take that education if you wish. From there, you move into performance and more specialized licensing for the age and stage of player that you're working with as a coach. Those being the children's and youth license, as well as the A license and B license, are currently available within Canada. Locally here in Calgary, this is what you will find within our leagues, and you'll see a lot of boxes that say recommended right now. That's going to change quite quickly with standards for quality soccer coming into play, and that standards for quality soccer is the Canada Soccer Club licensing program. They're going to have certain standards for every single coach that must be met in order to be members in good standing within all organizations. So within CMSA, within Alberta Soccer, and then also within Canada Soccer. So a lot of these recommended will become required as early as next outdoor. So you will see an increase in coach education and that being put at the forefront to make sure that players have got a qualified coach as often as possible. And we're looking to make it a requirement within our leagues that the standard of coach must be the age and stage of the player that they're working with and aligned to Canada Soccer's grassroots standards, which we'll get into in a little bit. I do this because this is something that we've been advocating to the clubs at the numerous club connects that we have with them in terms of how we want to gradually increase the standard of our coaching and our coaches within Calgary over time. So you'll see in Outdoor 2022, that's where the biggest changes started to come in, where we were advocating for all coaches to be completing making ethical decisions. This is a requirement for SQS licensing within clubs and will become a requirement for coaches to remain coaches within CMSA. We're also wanting to see better licensed coaches at the tier 1 levels in terms of a C license trained and then eventually C license certified. Very sorry that I keep jumping around. I'm just trying to get the people who have been late to the presentation in as well. I will pause there for 1 second. I'll go back to the chat and look to answer something about coaching. Are decisions made about who is part of which team based on coach availability? Can you speak on this, specifically the evaluation process? So it's a great question. while we don't have a say or an input in club selection criteria or policies or that evaluation process within the clubs, what CMSA is advocating for is a process where young players aren't evaluated, where they're welcomed into an environment and they're given a certain amount of time to show, yes, this is the right environment for them, or maybe there's a different environment within our club that would be a better spot for them. There's another question that says, what does ethical mean in this context? Well, if you'd like to take that module, it would be fantastic. The making ethical decisions essentially puts coaches into role play scenarios and into certain situations where an ethical dilemma would occur and helps them work through that so that they can make better ethical decisions when posed with similar situations down the line. This is a requirement for the safe sport movement that Canada Soccer, Alberta Soccer, and CMSA are all involved with, and really trying to make sport a safe and inclusive environment. There's a question, ask questions throughout the presentation and wait till the end. Either or, I'm comfortable with either. We won't be unmuting anyone or starting anyone's camera just so that we don't cook the bandwidth and have numerous interruptions tonight. There's a question about, in our experience in recreational division, that there's very few coaches, period. Have there been consideration given to how increasing standards will aggravate those shortages? Safety and respect, of course, being paramount. And then an absolute monster of a question came in that I will get to. So in terms of coaching shortages, we had 130 extra teams compared year over year entered into indoor this season for CMSA. With that, and with the groundswell of players who are wanting to become a part of the game, we'll obviously have a shortage of coaches. So with that, we're trying to work with our clubs to advocate with them that if you're going to show up as a parent anyway, it's not that much harder to actually coach. And the resources and educational material around right now to try and support coaches is continuing to improve, and we're continuing to try and work on that. In terms of a shortage of coaches at the recreational level, we'll talk about that a little bit throughout this presentation and how we can potentially get some solutions around that. There's a question here, why communication with parents is so poor? I simply need more context to that, and I will get to that, I'm sure, throughout this conversation. So I'll come back to that. In terms of some of the educational resources that CMSA has prepared, we've prepared a grassroots league video, which I would encourage you to watch because it gives you an insight into the direction that CMSA is taking the game in Calgary. It's through a research-based best practice model that prioritizes meaningful competition, social relationships, and an openness to the game. Something that's very different and something that is, in the words of the Alberta Soccer Technical Director, Jason Blake, a very brave plan. So we know that the change isn't easy. We know that it's going to be difficult and that cultural change takes time, but we're firm believers that we can make a significant difference in this game and in sport through both the grassroots league and through some of our initiatives. We've also looked to define what developmental and recreation programming is, because it used to be that there was a system of tier A, B, C, and D within CMSA. And that, before my time, got then absorbed into A's and B's into developmental and C's and D's into recreation. So we started to divide players based on ability at very young ages. And all of the research right now, and we'll get into this around talent ID and talent development, show no correlation with your ability at 8 or 9 or 10 years old and what you will become at 16, 18, 24 years old. There's also an educational video around lopsided game strategies that we would encourage all parents to watch so that you have an awareness of when something looks a bit different on the field, like 4-up, 1-up. Why is there an extra player on the field? Why have they just mixed up the two groups? Or why have they swapped the goalkeepers today? That's not my kid's team. You'll at least have an awareness on what's going on with that, and you can take part in a meaningful discussion. Right, carrying on through into And I see that there's some more questions in the chat. Would ask that respectful dialogue is here tonight. I will give everyone a chance to voice their opinion, but as soon as it's not respectful, the conversation won't be shut or tolerated much longer. So I want to make sure that we have a good dialogue and that we have a respectful dialogue throughout what we're trying to do here tonight. The cup competition that CMSA has launched as well. Again, none of these initiatives are done in a silo. All of these pieces are done in consultation and in collaboration with all of our member clubs, and none of them are launched with 2 weeks notice. These projects are in the works for a minimum of 12 to 18 months, and even little things like playing 9v9 at U13, that took a year to plan and implement and then to support. And while things might seem willy-nilly and communication might not seem great, what we're committed to at CMSA is to ensure that we're communicating directly to parents. We're no longer going to be relying on our clubs to do the communication for us, and we will be sending communication directly to parents more often so that the message isn't misconstrued and so that there's clarity and alignment and consistency within the system. And so one of these initiatives that we've launched is the cup competition. And so this is our provincial qualification mechanism. It's a way for us to bring a more developmental focus to the league play at U13, 15, and 17 and 19. And it's around teams opting in. So teams that actually want to compete to go to provincials, as opposed to teams who are comfortable playing games and not wanting to go to provincials. We've seen a lot of teams that once they find out the location of a provincials, back out and are faced with heavy fines. So rather than having every single game be a win-at-all-cost match, that then impairs coaches' behaviors, that taints parent behaviors, and that compromises the development of our kids, we've decided to take that out of the league play, make the league very developmentally organized, and then have that as a memorable experience for those teams wishing to compete on the road to provincial competition. Now, we launched it last outdoor and had a couple of major learnings that we're looking to revise and to launch with those learnings included in this indoor season. Some of those learnings are a delayed seeding process so that we get an accurate snapshot of where these teams are at right now. And then also delaying the start of the cup competition so that there are more games leading up to it for coaches to tinker with lineups, to experiment with different formations, and that players get a chance to be comfortable within maybe a new team environment before they are put into a highly competitive match. I would also like to speak about the Empower Her initiative, which is CMSA's Women and Girls in Soccer initiative. We are committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and indigeneity. And as such, we're going down a path of gender equity and gender equality. And so on the player side of the Empower Her piece, we've had 2 drop-in nights, which are largely a social night for girls to come and play in an unsupervised, unadult interfered, if you will, environment. And what we find is that older players are mixing in and helping with younger players, that the social atmosphere with music and games, good times, just being the focus has actually led to some positive results. We also encourage the participants to bring a friend and are looking to try and attract more women and girls to the game of soccer. You'll see over here in the top right of your screen as well, the Steph Labe Champions Tour, where we subsidized all the registration fees for that. So 190 young women within Calgary got to go and rub shoulders with an Olympic gold medalist, take part in a motivational chat and a meet and greet, as well as ask questions and take part in a live training session with her. It's very rare that we launch something or do something and there's absolutely no negative comments. And this was one of those rare occurrences where literally the feedback from everyone was, this was the best day ever. And these are the kinds of experiences that we want to be creating over and over and over for our players. We also want to start a big sister program. And so what this would look like would be a local university or college player being integrated within the team and within a youth CMSA female team as a role model, and really as someone who can answer questions about their developmental journey and about what the game has done for them and how they've gotten to where they've gotten. We want to see this as a soccer for life piece and encouraging young women to stay involved with the game. There'll be more details on that, and we're just trying to finalize some of the participation within that. In the other sphere, it's about creating leadership and other traits that will be applicable outside of the field for these young women. And so last International Women's Day, we hosted a webinar with Shahiza Haji, who's a local entrepreneur who has had some significant bias problems, challenges, and barriers that she's overcome to become a successful entrepreneur here in Calgary. And she's used those lessons that she's learned from sport and applied them to her business to become successful. I would encourage you to go back to our YouTube channel and give that a watch and to share it with any of the young women in your life, because there's some powerful messaging and some inspirational pieces within that from Shahiza. On the coaches side, we will continue to subsidize female coaches who are enrolling in a C license, and we're simply looking for more female coach representation within CMSA. So if there's any moms, aunts, older sisters on the call tonight, what's stopping you from becoming a coach? And you're probably going to say a myriad of other pieces, but coaching is an incredibly rewarding piece of my life that I don't get to do as often anymore. But I would encourage you to step up, help out even a little bit, and to be involved as a role model as well within some young women's lives within your club. And lastly, around the officiating, so refereeing and women in refereeing. Before the outdoor season, we saw 34 youth entry-level course graduates that were young women. We subsidized their registration for that course, and we increased our female youth referee pool by 278% just with those 34 who have come in. We know that there's more coming, and this indoor round of entry-level courses as well saw an increase in female youth referees. So we want to keep supporting them, and we want to keep ensuring that they have every opportunity to progress in the game of soccer in that capacity. And then lastly, around what we're doing with our referees, and I'll advocate to anyone on the call tonight that we're always short referees. We continually need referees, and there's a great opportunity for a flexible part-time job, that you make your own schedule, that you stay fit, and you can enjoy the best seats in the house within the game. What we're trying to do from both attracting and retaining referees is, one, a zero tolerance for abuse policy. So even things like come on ref or open your eyes or things like that are just detrimental and not needed in our soccer culture within the city. So there's a zero tolerance standpoint for any sort of referee abuse, and it's really that simple. The other piece is we're trying to retain these new young referees within the game, and with that is with the Teal Shirt campaign. It's an acknowledgement that some of these referees are brand new, that they're learning the game the same way as your volunteer coaches or your players are, and that they're going to make mistakes. And so what we've done is we've created a couple of educational resources for our clubs, for our parents, and for everyone that live on our YouTube, explaining what the Teal Shirt campaign is about and really what our core outcomes are from that campaign. The other piece is around the mentorship program that we are wrapping every single new referee in to become both involved in the social aspect of the referee community, but also to learn from more seasoned and veteran referees. So all of these new referees will be getting 4 touch points in their first 20 games to ensure that they know what they need to be working on and that there's a development plan for each of those referees. We're working with a gentleman called John Carlucci in administering and developing this program, and it's come off quite well, we believe. The survey results suggest 95% return rate from those referees from outdoor to indoor, and we're quite happy with the way the mentorship program is progressing. So if there's anyone on the call that's interested in becoming a referee, or you might have an older child that's 14 years of age or older that wants to take a shot at refereeing, CMSA is here to support them and wants to support them in their refereeing journey. All right, so I'll hit pause again and I'll see if there are questions that are applicable to what we've just been talking about. It is a difficult one if there's numerous questions that to keep track of them all, but I will try. Dimitri, I won't forget about yours. Don't worry, that will be coming up. Understand that U11 is not tiered. It seems as though it is. Understand that teams will get into that. Brave plan, why? Socializing over talent development by mixing tiers. Marcel, we'll get into that as well. Jason believes it's a very brave plan because it's not seen in Alberta or really in the country yet. And in a country that prioritizes provincials and winning and useless metrics in a youth developmental sphere, it's a brave plan to try and shift culture the way that we're trying to do things. So I go through enough counseling as it is with the negativity from most of the environment that brave plan will obviously have some casualties along the way, hopefully not in players, hopefully just myself. And really it's about changing the entire landscape and doing things properly. Younger kids, from what I've seen in data, want to play sports to make friends, have fun, and yes, learn the game. Great comment. Appreciate that very much. Great concern. Competition to the different clubs to not tier the kids, whatever research motivated the changes. Within teams, you see the skilled kids. My opinion, these changes are not doing any good. Appreciate that opinion, Pablo. We'll see what happens in the next 5 to 10 years with it. And we'll get into the rationale as to why that's happening. This isn't our experience. Ryan, that's a great point. Again, I'll be getting into that in a moment. Don't think Dev and Rec should be mixed. They're not, Ophelia, so I'm not sure what you're talking about there. Seeing the same thing early this season about blowouts, mixing Rec and Dev kids on the same team seems to be doing a disservice to both. I'm not 100% sure that the labels and the context of what we're calling recreation and development are the same as what we're talking about. So we'll get into what those definitions are. In outdoor, there was a 1, 2, 3. Appreciate that, Trevor. We'll get into that here tonight. What cup in U11 or 12? There is no cup in U11 or 12. Empower Her program's a really good one. Appreciate that. Wondering if you can comment on changes in the rules. 100% we'll be commenting on the rules and giving everyone some context there. And I will make sure that I get back to Lisa's comment on carpet rather than turf. So I want to start off again by framing things and why we feel like changes are necessary and why we feel changes are imminent. And I'm already 20 to 30 comments behind within the chat. So if you continue to add them, it'll be very jumbled at this point. So give me a moment, let me work through this, and then we'll have another break for questions and for comments. This is what we've seen in our player numbers. And someone on the U7 to 10 town hall expressed the point of, well, isn't that sport wide? Don't we see numbers dropping like this across all of sport? Sure. Probably. While I don't have numbers from football or hockey or Quidditch or badminton or tennis or cricket or any of those sports, what I can say is if we're just comfortable accepting that this is the norm, that our kids just drop out of the game, that they don't have the required physical activity that's prescribed daily, if we're comfortable with that as a society, then I would ask us to change our view as a society, because none of that is acceptable in my opinion. And this is arguably our greatest problem, is that we seem to do a great job of attracting the little ones, the U7s to U9s into the game, but we do an incredibly poor job of retaining them within the game. And I want to make sure that there's some context here, that some of this data is a little muddied, especially from 2017 here, where House League players are included in some of these numbers. So our data is a little muddy, but it shows a worrying trend that we have to try and figure out ways of stopping. And this isn't from a business standpoint. This isn't from a revenue standpoint. This is strictly from a what's best for the game. And so if we know that we're not keeping kids involved in the game very well, and statistically we don't produce elite level players, one has to question the system that we have in place, because statistically, Canada is the worst in the industrialized world of developing elite level soccer players. And yet we rank in FIFA's registration as 10th in the world for the number of youth players that we have. There's federations in the world that'll talk to Jason DeVos and say, I wish I was in Canada. I wish we had those kinds of numbers. And so really the question is if we're not retaining players, we're not developing elite players with tiered best on best leagues at really young ages and likability groups of players being grouped together, then why do we do that? And so change for the sake of change is not something that we're into, and we need to accept that changes happen, and change in the sporting world is going to happen at a rapid rate right now. We don't smoke on airplanes anymore. Coca-Cola isn't medicine. And unfortunately, kids get put in a car seat and buckled in on long trips and short trips in the car. And I wish that I had that option, because my little guy absolutely hated a car seat. I wish he could have just laid down and had a nap. And so what we're trying to do at CMSA is not change for the sake of change by just changing the direction of the triangle, but rather improving on what we do and aligning to what best practice research tells us will work or could work better than the traditional system. And these changes have to occur because the current structures and programs simply don't facilitate providing sport for all or the development of elite athletes, as I've alluded to. And so CMSA has taken a lens like this, where we have looked at a four-corner model of what a player actually needs, and we've adapted a model from Dan Abraham, who's a renowned sports psychologist that you can follow on Twitter. He's got some fantastic material, and he's a very intelligent man that puts the person's mental, social, and emotional well-being at the core of what we want to be doing. And from that, technical, tactical, and physical outcomes will be fueled, rather than looking at it as a four-corner where they're individual and they're not linked. We want to make sure that we're tending to the mental, social, and emotional piece first. And this is something that we're advocating to our clubs as well, because then we get participation and progression and then performance out of these players. And we'd be remiss if we were to think that any sort of changes or anything that we do, and granted the old logo is here, so you've caught a flaw in the presentation now, but any changes that we do at the system level affects both the personal and the environmental levels. It also sometimes affects the system and shakes things up and causes a different stimulus or constraint within the environment. And so we need to be cognizant that when we change things, it affects the human or the player at the end of the day and everything else within it. And so I always ask this question within the young ones presentation. I thought I would include it tonight. And you don't have to enter anything into the chat, but I would love for you to reflect on how your club guaranteed has gone through an evaluation and a tryout process for these very young players, and how they've decided both what coach gets put on that team, as well as what team the player gets placed on. And what is that criteria? And so usually I launch a poll and it's got loads of options, but it typically comes out with this kind of a result. It's skill. Skill is what we evaluate and rank players on. Skill. Skill at 8, 9, 10 years old at the latest, which all of the research around talent identification, talent development, talent selection shows absolutely zero correlation between skill and performance at these young ages that we're talking about tonight and elite level performance. And the realities is we simply do not know who is going to become an elite level performer. And someone on the call right now will think, well, such and such pro team in England actually brings in 4 and 5-year-olds into their center of excellence. And that's where they're scouting players. They're scouting players at 4 and 5 years old. They're simply not right. It's borderline child abuse, and it's not right. It's filling these young players with hopes and dreams that not 1% will actually realize that dream. And so the core of the why, and this is from Canada Soccer and a piece that we are looking to follow, is the traditional method of choosing those select number of players based on their performance levels right now through a one-off or two evaluation session, organizing them into a team and then putting them out to compete against other teams. It's flawed in these ways. It doesn't predict potential or future performance at all. It'll turn away players who might have high potential, but who are just inexperienced at that moment relative to their peers. Early selection prior to physical maturation implies the early exclusion of the majority and can, I like to think will as well, discourage players who might otherwise become as good or better if you give them a time and a chance and the appropriate environment to develop. And also the characteristics that define talented athletes in early age are not the characteristics that define elite athletes later in their career. Think about the elite, and I hate using the word elite with these kids, the elite 10-year-old. What do they look like in your mind? They're probably bigger, they're probably faster, they're probably stronger than their peers. And you know what? They've probably been playing the game in their backyard or in organized soccer or just playing more at recess for the last few years than some of their peer group right now. But if that's how we define talented athletes, that is not what is defined as a talented athlete later on in their career. And there's often a misalignment with what we expect, I think, both from the system and as parents and as coaches and even as players. We expect the developmental journey for these kids to look like that it's linear. It goes in a straight and constant line with a defined beginning and end. But really, the reality looks something more like this, that it's non-linear. It's forward, backwards, sideways, up, down, left, right. And there really isn't a defined endpoint to their developmental journey. And so you can see there's a disconnect between these two images. They don't work together. And so when these expectations aren't aligned, and also our system is not catering to the image on the right, that's when we have problems. Because our leagues want to be about these things as well. And these are features of positive developmental settings that are reinforced in literature, that are evidence-based, that there's always physical and psychological safety. So these kids and these coaches and these referees can express themselves, to be creative, and that these programs aren't intimidating or frightening, that there's an appropriate structure that's clear, that's consistent, that's age appropriate, and there's appropriate adult supervision, qualified coaches involved in it. And someone on the call is going to say, well, CMSA is not that clear or consistent or this or that, and they'll have a cheap pot shot right now. And you might be right. You might be right that we are trying to change a lot of pieces at once. But I will say this, the majority of the change is done, and now it's just about little tweaks. The other piece is around supportive relationships and opportunities to belong. For sure, these are things to be working towards in all of our settings in sport. And we want to make sure that we've got positive social norms on how society should operate, and not in the typical masculine, aggressive, gladiatorial, competitive model of sport. Because these are kids. They're kids. We want to make sure that there's support for efficacy and mattering, and that these programs are child-centric to promote empowerment, autonomy, and opportunities to experience challenge. And that if we operate in a high stretch and high support environment, we will have fantastic outcomes. It's where we operate in a low stretch, low support, low stretch, high support environment that we have difficulties. We want to make sure that there's opportunities for skill building, so these kids learn how to play the game and build on other life skills, and that integrating family, school, and community will make for the optimal environment for development to happen. Because children compete, and I say this all the time to parents, children compete no matter what the setting is. And someone will think now, well, yeah, it's tough to compete when you're getting beat 15-0. 100%. I'm not going to say that's an easy task. I'm not going to say that's empowering, and I'm not going to sit here and say that that's positive. But what I will say is that kids will compete at their level. And in the image there, the one child doesn't even have shoes on. The other one's in blue jeans. And I bet you they know who's winning and losing. I bet you they know the score. And I bet you they're fairly competitive. And really what we do as adults is we compare. And comparison is often the thief of joy. So what I would say is to stop comparing your child against a teammate, your child against the opponent, and compare your child against a past version of themselves, of one that occurred a month, 2 months, a week ago. Are they more resilient? Are they more confident? Is there a greater sense of belonging? Have they worked on some skills? Where are they at? Because I think this is the lens that a lot of people take, is that competition in the match day serves the role of master, but it doesn't actually serve the athlete in their long-term development, because that is the servant. That's the test at the end of the week to see how good the training environment's been from coaches, to see what I've worked on, to see if I can apply something, to see if I can beat an opponent, to see if I can support my teammate. It's not the master, but rather the servant. And so, cool. I'm going to take a second there before we get into this 11 and 12, which is what you've actually tuned in for tonight. And I'll go back to the chat and I'll see if there's anything quick. Both great questions, my big concerns. Mixing games, got it. I can understand the issue now. Multiple U11 teams that are tiered. We'll get into this very shortly. This conversation, carpet's a big challenge, balls bouncing. Teams identified as developmental, no other info. Referee support's really awesome. Thanks, Marcel. I agree with Dan. 7-on-7 soccer field's very congested. The girls are bigger. Got it. Did I say 18 plus for reffing? No, 14 plus for entry level course enrollment. Great part-time job for your kids. Comment on why U10 boys get to spend their entire season on turf while 12 girls, same tier, same club, play on carpet. Not a problem. There's been a lot of like underlying tones of sexism, not, I'm just saying from here, but also some emails that we've received. There's nothing sexist about it, and I'll make sure to clear that up. Excellent. We'll dive in and then I'll get back into the chat, because I think a lot of these questions will be answered. And if they don't answer or get answered, please just copy and paste them again, because I want to make sure that we've got everyone walking away with some understanding. So, okay, the process that we've gone through for the 11s and 12s for the Dev and Rec piece. So we began the consultation process of what the Grassroots League and what the Developmental and Recs area and ages would look like. We went through this process for the last 2 years ago with the clubs, as we were preparing for the Grassroots League to be launched and roll up with the 2013 age group. So the goal was that these modifications with the Grassroots League would essentially phase out the developmental and recreational side, that it would become one grouping of players. And people on the call right now are probably thinking, well, it's two divisions right now and it's ugly right now. What's one going to do? And there's some differences within the Grassroots League compared to this. And ultimately, the U11s would have been the same anyway in terms of a developmental and recreational standpoint if we just carried things over, because that's what it was last year, and that probably wouldn't have changed. What we did with the clubs is we developed a 3-year league plan that was outlined then, and that gets reinforced at all of the Club Connects that we host. And we host a minimum of 4 of these per year with the clubs, where we bring them all in, they sit down, we have a conversation, they suggest things, we suggest things, and we go away, and then we produce a body of work that gives them the clarity of what this is going to look like. We've been advocating for 2 years that the clubs balance their rosters within these age groups, because there's absolutely no research that supports ability-based groupings at these young ages. But there is research that supports balanced groups and closing achievement gaps later on in their developmental journeys. Clubs and coaches are fearful of doing this due to the repercussions that are going to happen when both misinformed or misguided parents believe that this is the wrong approach for youth sports. Clubs fear that there's going to be mass exodus from their teams, and that the club, rather than taking a research-based approach, are often caving to the intentions of hyper-competitive and sometimes misguided parents. And I can understand that because there's an economic piece to it and there's a team viability piece to it as well from the club standpoint. And so there have been numerous inconsistencies between what the clubs have done, as some have balanced their rosters. Others continue to proceed with non-research based approaches that really only cater to traditional sport models and really won't produce the types of results that we expect out of sport and soccer. So to get ahead of this problem and these inconsistencies, we produced a club registration handbook. You can find this on our website. And if you want to dig around right now while I'm talking, no problem. It's readily available, and it's a fully transparent piece of what our league offering is. We developed this, outlined what every division was going to be, and made it available to all of the clubs in early July. So this is prior to them opening their indoor 2022-23 registration and them developing those registration and promotional materials. We produced this to create some alignment and consistency, as well as some clarity for parents, for players, and for the consumer at the end of the day. The reality is many clubs simply didn't modify their registration packages, with many advertising things like Tier 1 at U11. It was never Tier 1 at U11. It was never a tiered system. It was always a developmental and rec system. So I'm going to encourage you to compare what your club registration handbook was, or sorry, what the club registration handbook from CMSA is, and what your club actually provided and advertised to you. Because we know that this disconnect is causing some confusion amongst stakeholders within CMSA. And I want to encourage you to find that handbook on our website before registering with your club for next outdoor, so that you know what the league offering looks like, you can ask great questions, and you can be well informed. I also want to make sure that it sounds like I'm blaming clubs here, and I'm not blaming clubs. This is a communication exercise, and Dimitri said communication has been poor. So we have a part to play and own that. So we'll make sure that we do better with that. At the two club connects leading up to the indoor 2022 and 23 season, CMSA proposed the league structure, this, to all the clubs. And then we had another club connect to align all the leagues and ensure every single team was placed in the right division and correct level for them. Now, with one massive open developmental division and another open massive recreation division, which is no different than what U10 and U11 were previously, we were attempting to reduce the tiering and that system put upon young players based on what you've just heard and that research, and also to eliminate the disproportionate allocation of coaching and other resources to better teams, which has already been outlined in the chat by a parent, that there's a lack of coaches at the recreational level. And who knows what those kids will be in 5, 10, 15 years. And I also don't believe that your ability right now should determine the quality of experience that you get within the game. We also recognize that these U10, U11, U12, these kinds of age groups are still entry points for kids in soccer. So this is the other side of the coin. And that some have been playing for 7 or 8 years already. And so what we've done is we've gone through where we were, a consultation process with the clubs, and we've modified what we're going to be doing. So the developmental and recreation divisions will have their schedules modified from December onwards to have more meaningful competition, to have more like with like groups paired together. Because we know that there's a disconnect. And at the end of the day, this disconnect really only affects the player at the end of the day. And we want to make sure that they have an enjoyable experience within the game, that they're able to pursue the game at whatever level they want, and that we need to do right by the player. So we talk about cultural change. This is big cultural change that we'll work on for the next few years, long after your kids are gone from these age levels. I want to take a couple of seconds to discuss what these two meanings are. So developmental, we produce this educational material to really clarify what people will be signing up for developmental soccer. And really, this is a label. This is a word. Do they love soccer? Are they looking for a more full-time program? Do they want more soccer activity per week in their calendar? This has nothing to do with ability right now. because we have no idea when a player is 8 years old or 10 years old, 11 years old, what they're going to turn out like. And that soccer is a late developer sport. So if we see attrition rates like we are, we're actually not capturing players in that late developing area and timeline of their career to actually progress them and help them with their career. So that's what developmental means. And I want to be really clear on that. And that's the definition of that word that we use. The recreational side, these kids and these families probably love a variety of activities, camping, music, the game, other sports, etc. They want a more part-time program and they want less activity per week. They want less soccer in their calendar. Again, nothing to do with ability, because the other side of the coin was you had players that had a decent level of ability compared to their peers in a recreational setting that clubs were putting undue pressure on to go into developmental programming that came with additional costs, that came with additional activities per week, that came with an additional burden on the family and on the player. And what we've seen from those players that have went from recreation to development in those cases is they stop playing the game within 3 years. That's not what we want. So I want to be really clear about what those two definitions are. Also want to talk about some strategies for some of the lopsided games that even if we have ability-based tiering within these leagues, there will be some lopsided games because these kids with that non-linear developmental pattern will have good days, bad days, and awful days. And if you get an awful day against a very good day, ugly things are going to happen no matter if they're tiered or not tiered. And so some of these are 4-up, 1-up, where if a team is losing by 4 goals or more, they can add an extra player onto the field. They don't have to, but they can. Or maybe that team that's winning removes a player from the field. There's also the mix 'em up, where if it is clearly not the appropriate matchup on the day, there's absolutely no problem with mixing the two teams together and playing a match. Because if this happened on the playground, I can guarantee you they would play 5v10 with the 5 best players here against 10 of the other players, and they would just play. Or those 5 players would be mixed amongst the 2 squads, and they would just play. So I'm not sure why adult interference within the game makes it so that we don't have a child-centric and child-first approach to what we're doing. And then the last one is around swapping the goalkeepers. So if one goalkeeper is working a lot in possession or isn't seeing a lot of action at all because the run of play is the other direction, then just swap them so that they both get an equal amount of work. Because come U15 and U17, the need for goalkeepers is extreme. It's absolutely crazy how many teams do not have goalkeepers and are struggling to keep it together. Apologies for the tea break. My family's getting a little sick, and I need it to probably make it through tonight and tomorrow night's presentations. I'll talk about the field standards as well, and we'll get into why certain centers and why certain surfaces are being used for some of these games. So there's this prevailing thought that the boarded fields are not appropriate for 7v7. And so on your screen, you will have the field sizes of all of the 7-a-side fields in this city. And what you'll notice is the glorious, coveted, prestigious turf fields that everyone wants at Calgary West Soccer Centre and Shoaldice are really no different than those boarded fields. Now, Shoaldice actually got painted the wrong dimensions, and that's why you see 30 by 60. It should have been 30 by 50, the exact same as Calgary West. So we're 3 yards longer in those boarded fields and 3 yards less narrow. So we made the decision to put the 10s, the 11s, and the 12s if we had to put the 12s somewhere. And that was dependent on team entry and the number of teams. We decided that if those were our youngest age groups and smallest humans that were playing 7v7, they got Calgary Soccer Centre. Now, the comments in the chats are, why do our U10s get to play at Calgary West and our U12s have to go down to the soccer center? The simple answer is The U10s are a part of our grassroots league where we are prioritizing geographical based groupings for that league so that while these families are new to the game, they have accessible match days within 15 minutes of their house. So our U7s, our U8s, our U9s, and our U10s will play at Calgary West, Genesis, and the Soccer Center. So by virtue of living in the northwest of Calgary, that's the center that they just play their games at and have their match day at. It has nothing to do with we're punishing the U12 girls by making them play on a carpeted field, or we're punishing the U11s or anything like that. It's simply because that philosophy within that league means that we are going to keep that as local as possible. So I hope I've answered some of those questions and put that to bed. There's also a notion of the carpeted field is really hard for players. The ball is super bouncy. It's really tough to control. Why in the world didn't you use a futsal ball? What we did when we decided to move everything to 7v7 is we put together an indoor working group. That indoor working group was comprised of 8 in-district CMSA clubs, 1 out-of-district club, and 1 referee. And so what we did is we sat down and we said, right, we've got futsal, we've got boarded, we've got 7v7, we've got all of these different formats. How do we create some simplicity and alignment and get back to where we can build from? And so we looked at futsal because a lot of people love futsal. We looked at futsal and we said, well, it's supported, but only in the referee education. So our coaches get no futsal formal education. Our parents get absolutely nothing as well. And then our players get lumped into this game where they go from 7v7 and outdoor to futsal, back to 7v7 to futsal to 9v9, and it's all over the place for them. Futsal at the end of the day is a completely different game. And yes, there's 2 goals, there's goalkeepers, it's played with a ball on your feet, looks, feels, smells, tastes like soccer. It's a different game. So we said, right, we're going to put futsal on pause until we can actually implement it appropriately. We looked at boarded, and is that representative of what soccer is? Well, it's exciting. I grew up in Edmonton playing boarded soccer. It's fast-paced. The parents love it. The kids seem to have a blast with it. But we said, is it representative of what soccer is? And we said, no. So we put boarded on pause. And then what we did is we said, right, we are going to have to use potentially some boarded fields. So we ran a pilot. We ran a pilot with some 2013 groups and some 2012 groups a few months ago. And what we did is we invited in all of the club's technical directors and staff to come out and view it. The ones who showed up were from Cal Glen, New Frontier, Southwest United, Airdrie/Rockies. We had Foothills there. We had a coach from North Calgary there, and we had a technical director from CNEU there. The rest of the clubs didn't show up. But what we did is we ran this pilot. We ran the pilot to see if the 7v7 match format would work in these boarded fields. We looked at the size of area, the square footage and yardage per player. We looked at how many 1v1 interactions they would have, how many passes, how many goals, how often the ball is rolling, so total ball rolling time, the restart times, and everyone who was there, there's someone from Mackenzie United there as well. Apart from one person, they said, yeah, I think this will work. I think this is a good step forward. That one person said, I just love futsal. I really love futsal, and I think we should use futsal. No problem. I'm sure we'll get back to a futsal context at some point. So that's the process that we've gone to say, this is where each group's going to be playing. Now, it was never our intention to actually have the U12s playing on carpeted fields. But as I said earlier in the presentation, there's 130 extra teams that have come into CMSA from one indoor to the next. And our forecast simply didn't account for that. We didn't think that this was going to grow as quickly as it has and recover from a pandemic as quickly as it has. So for us, our forecast and our modeling was just wrong. And we had to, based on facility availability and what our field permits are to actually schedule games, we had to put the U12s into those boarded fields for their games. That's the long and the short of it, and that's really the core of what happened with that. I'll talk quickly about the 7v7 modifications because there's a lot of comments I was skimming through in the chat as well. Retreat lines, what are they? What do they do? How does it work, etc.? Why are we doing a dribble in? And there's no offsides. So let's dig into that a little bit. In terms of the retreat line, we'll start with. I'm not going to go through this in incredible detail because we've produced a video on our YouTube that you can watch. It's 11 minutes long and it will go through this in a little more detail. So I'm going to fly through this a little quick until we get to the scenarios. Really, we've got the future game in mind and what the modern and potential future styles are going to need and what our players are going to need to compete in those game formats, because it's going to be faster, more pressure, and they're going to try and take in numerous cues from a match to make a decision. Again, putting the mental, social, emotional needs of the player first. These are the outcomes that we believe that a retreat line will give us. Again, you can review that later. There's formal research from the Scottish FA and New Zealand football around the retreat line and around how it works. Again, to view this, please visit the YouTube and to see all of these stats and why they've put it in. So here, this is the crux of it. You'll see in the bottom right of your screen, that's the icon to look for on YouTube. A goal kick. So the red team is attacking the goal, hasn't scored, shots gone wide, across the goal line and outside of the goal. So a goal kick happens and the red team would be expected to drop off behind halfway being our retreat line. This allows the blue team to play out to whoever they want. And we've modified this rule slightly from outdoor to indoor based on the way that teams were manipulating and abusing it. So once the ball either leaves the penalty area or is touched by a teammate, the red team can then come and look to win the ball back in that blue team's half. Now, the other scenario, and there's only two, and again, I'll talk about the modification, is if there's a foul to the defending team inside the penalty area. So red team has fouled the blue here. They would look to drop off behind that retreat line and the blue team would play out. Again, as the ball leaves the penalty area or is touched by a teammate, the red team can then look to cross the retreat line and win the ball back. In outdoor, and I want to make sure I'm clear on this, in outdoor, we had, as part of the retreat line, say the goalkeeper makes a save, that the other team would have to drop off. We've since eliminated that because it felt clunky. It didn't represent what the game actually looks and feels and smells like. So based on the feedback from technical leaders and from referees and even some parents, we've decided to modify that and to eliminate that. Now, what I think is going to happen is you're going to see a goalkeeper make a save and a lot more long ball soccer being played, but that's my hypothesis and we don't know. We want to be very clear as well that we're not saying that the goalkeeper, that the team has to play out short all the time. You'll see here that based on the scenario, this blue player would be a great option to receive a pass, and that the goalkeeper or player taking that goal kick should be encouraged to play the ball long. That's the right decision in that scenario. You'll see here that the scenario in the picture has changed slightly, and that this player being 1v2, maybe arguably 1v3, not the best option. So you as a parent, if you continue to see your coach advocating for a ball to be played long here, I would question if that coach has any sort of developmental intentions with your player and with your child. And I would question them on why they deliberately want to play the ball long when there's numerous other options to play the ball out. Again, when the ball leaves the penalty area or a teammate touches it, the red team can cross the retreat line. An infraction that you will likely see is this. We'll give you a goal kick example, and the red team hasn't all gone behind the retreat line. Ball is played, you would expect to hear the referee's whistle. Now, we're dealing at these age groups with a lot of teal shirt and brand new referees. They might miss these things. They might make mistakes. That's okay. We as a community can help them grow and get better and not abuse them with this. Referee would blow the whistle. back that red team up behind the retreat line, and look to retake it. Good. So there's probably some questions around, well, why do we play these formats? Why do we have this ball size? Why is the field this big? And what we're trying to do is follow both long-term player development, LTPD, which was produced in 2008 and 2009, and also an updated version, which is what you're looking at now. And this Canada Soccer Grassroots Standards lives on our website as well, because at the end of the day, we're going to be held accountable to how closely we align to this framework and to this format. And what you'll see with the U11s is a game format of 7-a-side. You'll see coach qualifications and requirements that are tied to standards for quality soccer. You'll see maximum game time per player per day. You'll see field sizes. You will see goal sizes, maximum goal sizes. We play with a 6x12 at these age groups, number of memorable events, and also restarts like pass-ins or dribble-ins, which I'll get into in a moment. You'll also see some interesting things here in terms of a festival format still advocated for at U11, and some other interesting pieces. You'll see that the retreat line that they're suggesting is 1/3 of the field. We've opted to go for halfway to allow for developing players more time on the ball to make a good decision. And also team travel time. We want to make sure that the game is local. And keep in mind, Canada Soccer develops this for a massive, geographically diverse nation like Canada. The U12s is a little bit different. You'll see 9v9 for the U12s, and someone on the call right now will think, well, why are we playing 7v7 in an indoor format then? Realities is 1, field space, and 2, costs. With facilities renting out at $650 an hour plus, the cost for 9v9 games will go through the roof, and your fees will go exponentially higher instantly. You'll also see restarts from the sidelines as throw-ins and a slightly bigger goal size for these players. And again, oddly enough, you'll see a festival or league format advocated for U12s and U13s. I can only imagine the amount of heads that would pop off if we went into a festival format with the 12s and 13s. I want to make sure, as I conclude this and get back to the chat, that there's an awareness as well about what the per player fees are for CMSA. There's a constant narrative that CMSA is a money grab, that all we do is try and make the game smaller to put more players on the field to make more money. And we've moved to a per player registration fee. And this is what CMSA charges the clubs per player at these age groups. From that $195, and this is your fields, your referees, along with some other bits that I'll get into in a moment, $10 of that goes to ASA as their player fee. And what I've done is I've tried to break this down in a price per match and then a price per minute if your roster is 11 players. And what we've tried to do is to move to this per player fee so that clubs are no longer putting 20 players on a 7v7 roster, so that they can maximize revenue while minimizing expenses on a per team registration fee to CMSA. It also gives us an opportunity to have smaller rosters so that these players will have more playing time, and upwards of 3.16 times more playing time per match than our previous league formats and how we were doing things. And you'll note that there hasn't been a 3.16 times fee increase than the traditional format. So you've gotten 3 times the value for the exact same price. And while I hate text-heavy screens, I felt like it was necessary to really outline where these CMSA fees go. And the majority of these fees go to literally booking fields for the games, paying the referees, and league-related expenses. There's a small amount that go to a facility fund because everyone knows that Calgary is dying for more facilities, and that would help the game to both upgrade facilities and then to also fund future facility projects. So if you've been to the Calgary West Soccer Center, you'll notice one of 2 FIFA Pro quality turf fields in all of Canada in there. It is literally the best product that anyone in the world can play on. That's a turf product. There's a piece that goes back to Kidsport, who helps fund numerous soccer registrations. Soccer is actually their biggest program that they help to fund for kids. There's fees that go to Alberta Soccer and Canada Soccer, and then a small portion helps to pay for myself and the rest of the CMSA staff and keep the heat on in our office to ensure that we are trying to run this game as efficiently as possible and that we continue to innovate and do what's right for the players and for the game. Someone's going to say in a sarcastic tone, well, you guys aren't very efficient. It's a waste of resources. And what I will say is that there's about 2 people who have been there pre-pandemic and that the staff is essentially brand new. And we're learning and we will make mistakes and we won't be excellent quite yet, but we're committed to being excellent. And so I will leave this on the screen as I dive back into the chat and look to answer some more questions, and hopefully I've covered some of it. You'll notice that I don't put my phone number on the screen. My wife hates it when there's random phone calls at 11:30 p.m. So I try to keep that guarded and close to my chest. But you can feel free to interact on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or to send me an email with any sort of issues or comments.